Evening. Welcome to House Groups. A big thank you to Peter Schuett for coming in on Sunday morning and teaching on Colossians 1:21 through 23. I'm so glad you got to hear his story. He has such a powerful testimony how God just completely transformed his life. You know, we read this week that we were once alienated from God. And not only that, it says in our minds, that's in how we thought, we were his enemies. We didn't want the one true king to be on his throne. We wanted it for ourselves. But Jesus teaches us to love our enemies. And he actually modeled that for us by loving us, his enemies. You know, one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible is Romans 5:8, where Paul says, "But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." So, like I say all the time on Sunday mornings, God didn't wait for you to get your life together first and then decide he was going to sacrificially give his life for you. While you were still his enemy, he died for you. But we read in Colossians this week that Paul said, once you were alienated. In other words, you're not alienated anymore. A lot of chapter 1 of Colossians focuses on your status change because of the gospel, that you were once an enemy of God, a sinner, and not right with him, but through your faith, he transferred you over to the kingdom of the Son. And you're no longer alienated from him, and you are now reconciled to God. So much so that now he is presenting you as holy in his sight, without blemish, and free from accusation, it says. Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, that's like what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5:21. He says, God made him, Jesus, who had no sin, he was perfect, to be sin for us. Our sin was put on him on the cross, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Let's change into Renovation U mode for a second. Let me share with you an example of the neat things that we teach in our summer classes at Renovation U. If we go a little deeper here, this is what's called the doctrine of imputation. So to impute is to attribute something to another person. If that doesn't make sense, let me explain it with an illustration. Okay, this is us, humans, and as you know, we're sinners. And here is Jesus, okay, the King, the perfect one. And Jesus, in his love for us, takes on our sin on the cross. Our sin is imputed to him. It's attributed to him, even though he was the one who had no sin, as we just read. And lots of times when people explain the gospel, they just stop there. But the gospel is actually even more beautiful than that. Because the doctrine of imputation says that your faith not only allows Jesus to take on your sin, but his righteousness, his status as the one who had no sin, is imputed back to you. So Jesus gets our sin, and we get his righteousness. But we can go even deeper here. Lots of times the Bible uses the word covering. So think of it this way. We are sinners, and our sin is like a blemish on our clothes. But Jesus is willingly covered in our sin. He takes it on and suffers the judgment for it on the cross. But for us, the Bible doesn't say that we become righteous or without sin, because we're not perfect. We still sin, right? Hopefully less, but we still sin. But see, imputation means that his righteousness has been attributed to us, that we are covered by his righteousness. Sometimes the Bible even uses the phrase of being clothed in righteousness. This is where our passage in Colossians 1 is helpful. So Paul writes that God has reconciled you and is presenting you as holy in his sight. It says you are without blemish and free from accusation or guilt. Well, why? Because the righteousness of Christ has been imputed to you. It's covering you. And when you meet God for judgment, what he will see on you is not your sin, but the righteousness of Christ. And that, my friend, is good news. Amen.